But I wanted to definitely do one today because the big thing is, of course, it's my mother's first heavenly birthday. And so many, one thing you can find out when you've never taken the time to learn. You learn a little bit more about your parents, unfortunately, when you have to write an obituary or things you may remember, or maybe it's something new and you just forgot, whatever the case may be. And so one of the things we always knew was that my mom played basketball, but it was one of those things that was kind of in the back of my mind about her playing basketball. And as we were gathering pictures, of course, we had the basketball pictures. And during her service, there was a moment where so many, the analogy of basketball was used, and it was such a teachable moment that it actually solidified something for me in that, typically my platform has been just solely focused on autism, but that I've really been looking at the pivot of autism is just one part of the story I need to tell, and that it's time for me to make sure I'm telling my story and how I've been able to, deal with different things. And resilience, because sometimes resilience gets a bad word. We want to say it as just, I'm tired of being strong. But resilience basically it just means you're not willing to break. You're thinking about the things you need to do, but you're not willing to allow yourself to break. And so what came to mind for me when I was thinking about everything with me pivoting along with the basketball and my mom and her eulogy, that there were rules of the game that she taught us, even though we never played the game. And so she had 3 girls, and none of us played basketball. I don't even remember thinking about playing basketball. She played softball as well, and I played my senior year, but that was just, I ended up playing. But none of us thought about playing basketball. So it's interesting that in never having picked up a basketball, she actually used the skills from basketball to teach us life lessons. And so what I wanted to do was come on and talk about there are 5 lessons that come from the game of basketball that I never realized that's where they came from. And so one, when you think about the game of basketball, has to do with playing your position. Everybody on the team has a position to play. And so for my mom, and when it comes to playing your position, it makes me think about, if you wonder what I'm looking at, like I said, I got a computer and I have notes. I have to have notes. I can tell you for sure today, because of the fact that it is her birthday. I didn't want to get lost and not say what I wanted to say. So one of the things was to play your position. When you're on a team, you have to play your position on the team. And sometimes we forget about the fact we need to play our positions on a team. And so that was one of the lessons that she taught us. And playing our position, because when we try to do everybody else's position, we wear ourselves out. So what do I mean by that? When we're thinking about our life, sometimes we're trying to do so many roles because we feel like we have to do those roles. And that can happen sometimes on a team, that you feel like, okay, I'm worried that this person is not going to do their job well, so you'll step in and do their job for them. Or you make sure you're close to play catch up if something happens. So that's one in particular, is making sure you play your position. And keeping that in mind that, your position is your position. Don't try to take over someone else's job if they need. Just because you feel they're not going to do it, give them an opportunity to see, are they going to do it, or is it not going to happen? Then the next one is to protect your pivot. A pivot is so important, and to pivot with purpose. It's okay to pivot. And some kind of way, a lot of people feel like it's not. It's no different than someone deciding they've been on their career for 20 years, and maybe they've decided, I want to pivot. A pivot is not a sign of weakness. It just means you realize that what you were doing was not working. And so that was another lesson that she taught us. And when something happens, how you're going to handle it, that pivot. So grief is a plot twist that creates a pivot if you allow it to, or it could be something that just takes you completely under. For me, when I think about what she taught us and through the game and the skills with the pivot, for me, so many things have happened. I had to pivot once I got my own MS diagnosis. We had to pivot when Kendall received her autism diagnosis. We had to pivot when Kendall received some additional diagnosis that made things more challenging. There have been moments where I've had to pivot. And one that stands out, and you know, I can laugh about it, is my shoes. I know that seems minor to people, but I've had to pivot from heels to flats, from flats to sneakers. But I had to pivot. It wasn't a matter of stopping me. I just had to pivot. So the main thing is, pivoting is not a weakness. If you feel like you need to pivot, then pivot. That's a game. That's a skill she taught us that we didn't realize because none of us play basketball. And so just know, just because you need to pivot does not mean it's a sign of weakness. It's a moment that you are keeping motion going because you realize what you're doing is not working. So we want to make sure we understand it's okay to pivot. That's something people make you feel like, I can't believe you're doing this at this age. It's okay to pivot. As long as you keep moving forward and you're not stopping, then do your pivot. The next one, don't waste the time out. You know, if you know, I know a little bit about basketball, and of course, I know there are so many timeouts that you get. And there have been moments where, if you've ever watched the game, where people have wasted the timeout. They're like, why did you call timeout? And they've lost the timeout. And we've got to make sure we don't waste the timeout. What do I mean by that is not wasting the timeout is realizing that, one, to be strategic when you need rest to get the rest. Don't just use all of your sick days for a vacation, so then when you're really sick, you don't have any days. So you got to be, you know, real strategic there when it comes to not wasting a time out. So you have those days, and I understand you're like, I'm gonna take them all, I'm going on every trip. But then when you get to sick, that person, you're dragging yourself in, you're not allowing yourself to rest. And we all know the older we get, rest is essential. That is a major part of how we deal with each day. So when we don't get proper rest, guess what happens? We're not functional. We're grumpy. All those different things can happen. So don't waste a time out. Make sure taking your vacations is great, but make sure you leave some of that time there so that when your body needs to rest, that you actually use that time to rest and not that you're running around with everything else. So don't waste the time out. That's the third one. The fourth one is think about the team over the trophy. My mom was really big on, one of the things we talk about, my sisters and I, is that there have been several people that have stayed with us. We kind of were going through the list this past weekend of all the people that have stayed with us. And that's simply because for my mom, team for her was community. So if you needed something, she was going to do it for you as best she possibly could. And for her, on many occasions, what she was able to do was open her door, open our home, because that person needed somewhere to sleep. And so it's real important that we think community and not always think about just ourselves and our own accolades. My mom did a lot without any accolades whatsoever. She was just who she was. Hi, sister. She was just who she was because that was a part of her character. And so we've got to make sure that we're not working for the prize. We're working because we realize it needs to be done. It's not about what others are going to see or what others are going to know. It's about thinking about the team, and the team is the community. So that was one of the things we didn't realize that she was teaching us about the game of basketball that we're able to apply to life, because once again, none of us, it's three of us, ever picked up a basketball. We may have done some other things, but that was one. She never managed to get any of us on the court to play basketball. So, but she taught us rules that we can apply from her years in basketball to life. And so, kind of backtracking, I've only covered 3 so far. 1, like I told you, I'm having to flip through notes because I know myself and I knew I needed the notes, so I would stay focused and not get caught up in losing focus, because like I said, today is my mother's first heavenly birthday. So the first one is play your position. Know your role. If someone else has the role of doing something, let them do it. You know, a lot of times we like to step in because we feel like they're not going to do it correctly. I can give an example. I've heard people say, I don't want that person folding towels because they're not going to fold them right. But then you'll complain that you're tired because nobody else is folding clothes. You've got to pick a lane. Which one do you want? Either you're going to want them folded and let them be folded, or you're going to keep doing it and do it your way. So we've got to make sure we play our position. If your position is to wash and the other person's is to fold, then let Hi, other sister. Let that be what the case may be. So that was one so far. Then the next one was protect your pivot. Pivoting is okay just as long as you keep moving. Pivoting is not a sign of weakness. It just means you realize something isn't working. And in game basketball, we see them pivot all the time. They make their moves. They do what they have to do to make things better. So keep in mind that protect your pivot. Don't let anyone tell you you can't pivot because you're a certain age. You know, I used to love, one thing I loved about education is when I would see older people come into education, and my first question would be, well, what made you change jobs? And they would say, I always wanted to be a teacher, but I was an engineer. And so I kept being an engineer, and then I decided I wanted to pivot. And they would be in their late 50s or 60s. So just know you can pivot just as long as you keep moving. In the game of basketball, we all know if they stand too long, then, you know, they lose the ball. So it's the same thing. Make sure you're pivoting. That person keeps moving and keeps that ball moving so that they don't lose the ball by not being active. So a pivot is okay. Protect your pivot and just know it's not a sign of weakness. Then, of course, number 3, don't waste the time out. We all have these days. Oh, my goodness. We have these 6 days. But for some reasons, we will use them all, I understand, to enjoy ourselves. But we're not protecting our timeouts because you only get so many. Same way in the game, they only get so many timeouts. And I've watched games before. There's one particular game, I can't remember the player's name, but I remember it was a collegiate game. And he called the timeout when he shouldn't have. And it was their last timeout. And I think they ended up losing the game. But that's neither here nor there. It's about protecting your timeouts, making sure that you give yourself timeouts so that when you need to take a break, when your body needs to rest, that you actually have the time and that you have not wasted a timeout. Because a lot of times we don't leave those days for us to actually get sick. We try to just drag ourselves in when we're sick, and all it does is make things worse. And sometimes it makes others sick, depending on how you're feeling. So don't waste the time out. Make sure you keep some of those days to actually take care of yourself. Then team over trophy. That's community. Take care of those around you. You know, one thing that I love when I go home is that my neighbor from across the street has been my neighbor all my life. And I know that if I need anything, no matter if I pop into town, if my sisters need anything, he's going to be there. And then there's some new neighbors, and they're going to step in as well. But the one right across the street has been there as long as I've been there. And it's about community. It's about making sure we're looking out for one another and not just looking out for self. And in looking out for one another, it may not be necessarily that they're coming into your home. It could simply be, I keep umbrellas in my car. You can buy them from the large box stores. Typically, a golf size umbrella may cost you about $6. I buy extra umbrellas because for me, I hate to see someone that is determined to get where they're going and they're standing in the rain. And because they're standing in the rain, I'm going to give them an umbrella. And it's unfortunate because the times we live in, it startles people when I say, hey, do you want this umbrella? I see you're standing in the rain. You can keep it. And, you know, they'll look shocked like, I don't know. And I'm like, get the umbrella, take the umbrella. So we've got to remember, when we're talking about team over trophy, we're talking about community. We want to make sure that that part of the game that she taught us applies to everyday life, and that we are making sure that we're thinking about the other people around us. There's a quote that I love by Maya Angelou that says, legacy is who you lift, not what you win. So let me say that again. Legacy is who you lift and not what you win. Hey, Heather. And so it's so important that we keep that in mind when we're thinking about community, that we're not just thinking about ourselves. We're thinking about those around us and how we can help. In education, I know it becomes a general thing, and in so many other settings. But just know it goes a long ways when we are building and thinking about the team and not thinking about the me. So you're thinking about, what can I do for others around me? That's so important. That's one of the rules that, even though none of us ever touched a basketball, my mother taught us because she knew the skills of basketball and she applied them to everyday life, and she applied them to how she raised us and how we saw her navigating each day. And so I talked about the pivot when my mom first had a seizure, understand her pivot was she couldn't drive. But did she stay home? No. The pivot was, give me a bus pass. I'm going to get where I need to get. That's the pivot. So we've got to make sure we're willing to pivot when things happen as well, because it's all about that forward motion. And so the next one that comes to mind with the rules and talking about the pivot is we want to make sure we're thinking of our legacy and the love that we're leaving behind. You know, people say it really, you know, in the cliche way of what you do with your dash matters. And that's the question. What have you done with your dash? Right now, if someone were to say what you've done with your dash, would it be something that makes you feel good? Or would it not be something that makes you feel good? So don't wait around. You know, I hear people a lot of times will say with my sisters and I wish I had that kind of relationship. Let me just say, the worst thing you can do is only allow yourself to come together as siblings when it's time to say goodbye to someone. So sometimes it means being the bigger person. Does that mean you have to talk to them every day? No. But it definitely means trying to have some form of communication before you wish you could have had communication. You know, when people ask me how I feel when it comes to losing my mom, one of the things I tell people, my mom lived with no regrets. And that makes me feel good. It makes me feel good to know that we made my mother proud, and we proudly wore the title, and we still do as Miss Jackie's girls. But just know that what happens in our dash is what people are going to remember. So if somewhere in your dash you didn't do the best, guess what? Remember, one of those skills from basketball, even though we never touched the basketball court, was to pivot. You can always pivot. Don't feel like you have to stay where you are. You can pivot. And so I chose this way because this is who I am. Hey, Auntie Gladys. Auntie Gladys is my mama's baby sister. And I never get the years right, but my mama's baby sister, my oldest sister, I think they're about 4 or 5 years apart, because my mother was the oldest. So, but to kind of recap the rules. Remember, my mom played basketball. We kind of knew it, but we never really thought about it a whole lot. And then, of course, when you're pulling pictures together, you know, when you're trying to put a program together and you're editing obituaries, that type of thing, you start remembering things and you start getting stories. You know, we got things from classmates. She was a Matthew Gilbert. Let me get it right. I think it was 65 or was it 64? Graduate. I don't want to mess around. Okay, Bronca, you and Gladys are 5 years apart. Okay, gotcha. But, you know, she played basketball. And so the fact that none of us played basketball, but during her celebration of life in the eulogy, I realized she taught us some lessons that were related to basketball that had us, you know, looking at how we live our life is what it comes down to. 65, class of 65. I knew it was 64 or 65. And so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to share those 5. So I'm going to recap them again. The one, play your position. Just know you have a position that you're playing. Don't always try to run and do everything else from someone else, because you know what it's going to do? It's going to burn you out. My mom played her position. Her position was she had an open heart and she had an open door. That was her position in the community. If you needed her, she was there. If you needed a bed to sleep in, she was there. And so that was her part to play in how she showed us how to live our life. So play your position, because you'll wear yourself out trying to do everybody else's stuff. And a lot of times we do it because, guess what? We want it to be done a certain way. But you have to get over that, because a lot of times we'll do it and then we'll complain that we're doing it. When Kendall folds the towels, as long as they're in somewhat of a square, I don't fight with it. Okay, they're folded. It's a task, it's done, and it's off my plate. That's the way I have to view it, because we can all play roles here. So one of the ones in particular, you know, my mom played basketball. None of us did. None of us ever were on the court. Now, let me just say, though, Kendall actually is a pretty good shot at basketball. But that's just not a game she's willing to run up and down the court with. That's definitely not. something she's trying to do. So the first one was play your position. That was the game, one of the skills she taught us from basketball that we applied to life. The other one was protect your pivot, protect your pivot. We've all had to pivot. I've had to pivot in life when I got a diagnosis. It changed things. It changed how I used my energy. It changed how I interacted with people. It changed how I had to eventually step back and say that, you know what, when I'm not feeling well, that I'm going to pivot and do something else, or I'm not going to pivot and do anything at all, that it's going to be okay, because I had to take care of me. But just know, late in life, it's okay if you want to pivot. If right now you are like, you know what, I'm getting ready to be 55, I'm getting ready to be 60, and I really want to try something else, pivot. Yeah, open door and an open heart, most definitely. Pivot. It's okay to pivot. It is okay to make that turn and do something else. Just stay moving. Just stay making that motion, keep going. And that pivot can apply to maybe how you live your life day to day. It could be maybe you come up across something that you're like, I got to get around this. I got to figure out what I'm going to do. Or it could just simply be you want to change direction. Pivot. The next one, don't waste the time out. Make sure you do not use all your sick days so you can rest. You know, we're really big on taking those days and taking trips. And then we turn around and when we're sick, we drag ourselves to work. And we feel like we're going to get a badge of honor for doing it. And there's no badge there. Just in case you didn't realize it, there's no badge that you're going to get. And the only person you're hurting is yourself, because you haven't stopped to rest. And the older we get, the more we know we've got to make sure we're getting rest. That's how our body restores itself. So don't waste the time out. Resting, a lot of people treat it like a luxury. That's what other people get to do. Let me just tell you right now, I'm giving you permission to pause and take a rest. It's okay. It's okay. Because sometimes we feel like we can't. So just know it is okay if you need to pause and take a rest. That doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. That just means you realize I need to rest. So that was one of the things as well. And team over trophy. She was about, when you think team, she was about community. That was the thing for her. It was always community, open door, open heart. You know, I mentioned before, we had so many people that stayed with us, and we were kind of trying to go over the list or whatever, and we all had kind of little different people we had forgotten about, depending on the time. But that was just who she was, you know. And for all of the people she opened the door to, or when she worked at the daycare and the parents could pick the kids up and the kids would come along with her, come home, and we'd see 3 little kids coming behind her that she had fed and was getting ready to do whatever to make sure they were taken care of by the time their mom got there. I never felt like I was missing out on anything. It was never a matter of, wow, she's giving somebody else so much attention. It was never, that never crossed my mind at all. That why is she giving that person attention and not, you know, one of us? Basically, it's the same thing when people say you'll never grow broke. Give it. It's the same way, because she was giving to us. She had enough to give to anyone she came in contact with, and we didn't feel like we were losing out on anything, like we were missing out on what she had to give to the world. So think about, when we're thinking about the big picture, right? Please, yes. And let me just say, so anybody needs to know, when I say people have come in, it's a 3-bedroom house and 1 bathroom. But if you needed a place to stay, Miss Jackie said, come on. And she would let you in. And we would make do. It was just, okay, figure out the rotation, how you getting in and out the bathroom. And that was it. It was never a blink of an eye to me. And different people that stayed with us. It was just who she was. We were used to it. So just know, when you're thinking about team over trophy, that's community. Think about those around you, how you can help. Talked about the umbrellas I keep in my car, because simply, I hate to see someone that's determined to get where they need to go and it's raining and they'll stand there in the rain waiting for the bus because they're determined to do what they need to do and they just don't have an umbrella. Umbrellas get lost all the time, or some people just never buy an umbrella. It's okay. Buy some extra umbrellas. You know, right now, we know it's Halloween. If you're in a position to make sure you buy candy, some of the kids, that's a highlight for them. Oh my goodness. It is such a highlight. Yeah, we always right. We had love for the people who live with us. We didn't feel like we were missing out at all. I mean, never. I see my cousin Cindy, and one of the things I laugh about, and I've told Rich about that I thought was hilarious, when our parents would have get-togethers and put all the kids in one room. Like, what in the world? Were y'all putting us in this one room? And we would be in there playing and knew not to come out. It was one person we would send out to go ask for whatever we wanted to ask for or whatever. But it was definitely, we had fun growing up. Let me just say. We had a lot of fun growing up when our parents would get together. So just know, even though none of us ever touched the basketball, I realized at my mom's celebration of life that she applied those rules from basketball to how she raised us, how she presented herself to the world, and that's how we still operate to this day. So just know, if you learn something, think about how you can apply the skill. I know that was funny times. How you can apply that skill to life. Sometimes we forget about that. We forget to apply that skill to life. And maybe you have an old skill that somebody need to know. Hey, Auntie Kathleen. Sometimes you have a skill you didn't even realize you had that you can teach someone else. Like, there are so many dying skills that we've got to make sure we're passing on. Even along with thinking about your legacy and that dash in between. That was my number 5, is making sure you think about your dash in between, the legacy, what you're leaving behind. Please make sure if you got recipes that you have somebody who has the recipe. Let me say that again. Please make sure, I know everybody wants to keep their recipe secret, but if you have the bomb recipe for the family mac and cheese or whatever the case may be, please make sure it's written down somewhere that someone can actually get access to it. And so one of the big things when I think about the game of basketball, that I didn't make it a rule that I said she applied, but I really should have made this my rule number 6, was being strategic. And so let me tell you why she was strategic. One of the hard things when it comes to losing a loved one is deciding who's going to kind of do what different things based on what's going to be how they feel, not forcing someone. And so it's 3 of us. And my older sister went to take care of the tough work. She was the person that went to the funeral home. And what she said was, I don't think I can pick out this casket. My middle sister was like, I'd be honored to do it. And then the next message I get back, this is the strategy, my mom, and being strategic. We were getting ready to, my middle sister was going to go pick the casket. And my mom had already picked the casket in 2007. That was strategic. In 2007, she picked her own casket. She paid into a plan through the funeral home. Now, let me explain to you why that's even more strategic. At that point, my mom had received an early diagnosis with dementia, but she was still living her life. But I guess she realized at some point, I may not remember something. And if any of you know anything about insurance policies, you miss 1, 2 payments, they'll just drop the whole policy. Doesn't matter how long you've had it. And to avoid that happening, she circumvented insurance companies and went and paid directly to the funeral home. If that ain't a strategy move, I don't know what it is. Let me just say that again. That right there was so strategic that all you can do, picked it out, had it paid for. We had no idea this had been done. The guy was like, oh no, she's been paying with money orders for years. Just know that that was one of those things that just took us back. Because we had no idea, none whatsoever. And we're talking about since 2007, it is 2025. That she was just that strategic in knowing what could possibly happen to her down the road. And she didn't want to make and miss an insurance payment. And they dropped the policy. So she paid directly to the funeral home. That way she knew it was being taken care of, and it wasn't a matter of I missed that payment. It was a payment plan I'm paying into. That's strategic. I mean, like no other. And we had no idea. I mean, none. I mean, we literally like asking each other, trying to figure out how she even was going by there, all those different, it was getting done. She made sure it was happening. That's strategy. That's strategic. And so she took those skills she learned in basketball and she applied them to how she raised us and how we saw her live her life. And just know, what you do with your dash is so important. We all, have a sunrise date. We have no idea when our sunset date is going to be. But make the best use of that dash. Do something meaningful. If you've done some things you are not proud of, pivot and keep moving forward and change what you did. It's not too late. But just know that dash in between matters more than you could ever imagine. And so when at the beginning I said her celebration of life solidified the pivot I saw for myself. I focused so much on just talking about Kendall's journey. And really I had to realize that I had to step back and realize it's not about just Kendall's journey. It's about how I have dealt with things and how I have been able to be just as resilient as my mom was. And resiliency gets a bad word. Resiliency basically means you're not willing to break. That's what it comes down to. That's really what it comes down to. You're not willing to break. And so many things could have broke my mom, and it never did. One of the things she could claim as her claim to fame was she was 3 for 3. What was her 3 for 3? She had 3 girls and she had 3 FAMU college graduates. That was her 3 for 3. And so if my cousin Cindy is on here, I remember when her 3rd child graduated, she was like, I got 3 for 3 like Miss Jackie. And so that was so, such a big thing. But just know, in my pivot, one of the things I want people to understand, Superwoman has a sunset date. She does. That cape was heavy and it has taken her out. The person that's living a living legacy is strategic woman. That's what it's all about. And my mom, having picked out that casket in 2007, it's 2025, lets me know strategic woman is what we need to be. Superwoman, no. We need to be strategic about the things we do. We need to be intentional about the things we do. And we need to admit when we need help. We need to make sure we understand rest is not a luxury. It's not a luxury item. It's an everybody item. And your body needs rest. The older we get. I am 52. I know I have to think about that sometime myself. But it's not a luxury. We all need rest. So recap these 5 before I hop off of here on my mom's birthday. And just know, she taught us basketball even though none of us ever played the game. That's really what it comes down to. And we didn't even realize we were learning the game and how she was raising us. But yeah, strategic woman is the woman that's still living. That's who's, it's the legacy. She is just going and going and going because we have given Superwoman a sunset date. And don't nobody go dig her back up. Let her stay buried. So the rules from basketball to apply to life. Play your position. Your position. Don't try to do everybody's position. It's going to cost you. You'll wear yourself out trying to play everybody else's position. Play your role. My mom's role was, she had an open door, open heart. That was her role. That's who she was. Play your role. Don't try to play everybody else's role. It's going to take you out of here. The next one, protect your pivot. In basketball, pivoting is everything. Pivoting, they have to still be in motion. And that's what it means for you to pivot as well. You got to be in motion. So pivoting is not bad. You're in motion. Just see it for what it is. You can always pivot. It's never too late to pivot. Don't think, oh my goodness, I've been doing something for so many years. Don't feel like when you come up against something like a diagnosis that you can't, how are you going to deal with? You're going to pivot. That's what you're going to do when something comes up. That's what you're going to do. My mom had her first epileptic seizure. She lost her driver's license. To pivot, she got a bus pass because she was like, I'm not going to miss out on what I want to do. That was a pivot. We can either, stop when something happens, or we can pivot. Learn to protect your pivot. Keep in motion. That's what it's all about. In basketball, remember, if they stop moving that foot, stop bouncing, they lose the ball. It's no different. If you stop, you're going to lose life. So that's the other one. The next one, don't waste a timeout. We all know basketball, they get so many timeouts. That's your sick days. Don't waste them. Don't take all your vacation days with your sick days, and then when you need to rest, you're like, I don't have days. I don't have the time. Rest is not a luxury. Rest is necessary. Yes. Yes, indeed, Auntie Gladys. You have got to get some rest. You don't have to be on the scene everywhere. Be okay with, oh, no, I'm not going to make it. I don't have a problem telling you I'm not going to make it. Or either I won't even comment and make you think I'm coming. I'm not going to fool you because I'm looking at how my week is going and I know I need to rest on that day. But at one point I would have been like, no, they said I'm going to go. No, not now. No, if it's a group message, I'm not going to respond. So don't have me in the head count. So don't waste the time out. Make sure you keep some time for yourself to rest. Think about team over trophy, community. That's what it's all about. My mom had an open door, open heart. That's what she thought about, was the community. If you needed somewhere to lay your head, your mama put you out, my mama took you in. If she saw a bunch of, and we keep talking about covering up your head. My mom used to buy skull caps all the time and gloves, and she would give them out. She worked at a daycare. That's always. I give out umbrellas now. It kind of trickles down to be the same way. But just know, it's not about the accolades. It's not about, getting all the titles for it. It's really about thinking about the community around you. If you know that there's somebody in your neighborhood who's elderly and maybe their children don't live by, maybe they never had children, and you all are getting together for Thanksgiving, see if they want to come. Even see if they just want a plate. Those are the things we forget about. We get caught up sometime in just thinking about ourselves. We forget about everyone else. And yes, sometimes it may take asking more than one time, but just check. When I see some of these videos where an elderly person lives next door, and it makes me think they're thinking about community, and they'll go to their neighbor because they can't open a jar. That it makes me smile. That they, are willing to go next door because they can't get the jar open. And so just know that's what it's all about. Don't get caught up. When you're thinking about the team, think about the community. And community could be your family, and it could be people that are not your blood family. I always tell people with Kendall, see things and think that there are things we can't do. I can tell you, we've done Thanksgiving where it's been 14 of us in this house. And we were okay and she was okay. So just know, you got to be willing to try those different things instead of just always saying, because it's not a flex to me to say you don't have any friends. Let me just say that. That's not a flex to me. And that shouldn't be a flex to you. You want to have someone. And I'm going to tell you the story of why you need to have someone. I was diagnosed with MS in 2009. It hits me at different things that it has taken away from me, and it gives it back, but it'll take it away. At this particular time, it took away my ability to drive. My feet were partially numb. And this particular moment, they decided not to put Kendall on the bus. She was upset. They felt like the best thing they could do was not put her on the bus to come home. Now, before everybody tags in and says they would have had to get her home, yes, they would have, but it would have made things much worse. So they called me and said, we didn't put her on the bus, and we need you to come pick her up. Houston, we have a problem. I cannot drive right now. Well, what about Dad? Dad is an hour away. And if she sits there that long, you're then really going to have a problem. Now, this is where I say it's not a flex to say you don't have any friends. I had to think. They said, do you have someone that can come and get her? And I stopped and I said, yes, I do. And then this was the next question. Will she recognize them? And I was able to say yes with my chest in it. Yes, she will. And it was my old work spouse. And I called her at work and told her what was going on. And she said, no problem. And she went and scooped Kendall up and then went and picked up her own son and brought Kendall home. So it's not a flex to say you don't have any friends. You need someone you can call on. Someone you can call on when something happens. Someone that if you have to pick up that phone, even your kids that are adults, you need to make, I always try to figure out, if somebody tells me their kid is going somewhere, I'm like, oh, this person I know was there. So just in case you need somebody to get to them, that if you call me, I'll call them. Because that's how I was raised. I was raised with open door. So for me, you know me, then I figured I still talk to you like that, then you must have an open door and open heart. You're going to check on that person's child for me. So just know, do the best you can with your dash. My mom did her best she could with her dash. And she left a legacy. And we're going to make sure it continues to shine, because that's how she raised us to be. 3 girls, difference in age of, just in case anybody's trying to figure out, I think Ronk and I are 7 years apart, Tan and I are 4 years apart. But just know, her legacy lives on. And to quote Maya Angelou again, legacy is who you lift, not what you win. And so remember that as you are now dealing with your dash right now, to make the best of your dash so that you can, leave if you get your sunset date and people don't feel like they have regrets for you or you have regrets yourself. And so those were the 5 things that she taught us, even though none of us ever played basketball. I didn't realize it until I heard her eulogy. And I was like, she taught us to be resilient. She taught us how to pivot. She taught us how to play our position. We play the position of the siblings. Who's the oldest? We play our positions. And then, like I said, her number one most strategic. This was such a strategic move. When it was time to do the hard stuff, when it was time to take care of planning my mom's funeral, come to find out, my mom had picked out her casket and paid for it herself. And she picked that casket out in 2007. That was such a boss move. Such a boss move. And so just know, the way you see me right now is not, this isn't fake. This is me. The reason there's a picture I've used that you can see my 3 sisters and I, as we're putting that flower in my mom's casket, that we can smile, is because we know we did best by our mom. There are no regrets. And so we could smile because for me, that meant at this point, that cane that she made look good, she has a new body. She doesn't need it. Her thoughts weren't full thoughts. She was forgetting things. See, that's not an issue anymore. Because I'm sure the first thing she did was make sure she could find her mom and her dad and her siblings, and they having a good time. So just know, those smiles weren't fake. How you see us now, that's not to say we won't cry here and there, but they're not fake, because we have no regrets of what we've been able to do for my mom over the years. And so make sure you do the best with your dash. And just know, now here's one joke to let you all know right now. We realized it today. We put the wrong birthday on my mama's obituary. And we can laugh about it. It was a mistake that we didn't catch till today. That in typing up, you missed the details. We forgot. We didn't check that. We put the wrong, sunrise date. And so, yeah, her pivot was her final move. It was a strategic play. As people say, that was a beast move. That was such a beast move. I don't want to worry about missing an insurance policy payment, because then they ain't going to drop the policy. So I'm going to pay this directly to the funeral home and pick my casket. Boom, that was a beast move. That was a beast move. So have a great one. Once again, remember the quote from Maya Angelou. Legacy is who you lift, not what you win. So have a great one. I know my mom is, having a good old time because she doesn't need that cane anymore, and all of her thoughts are perfectly clear. And I'm going to live that way, remembering the lesson she taught us through the game of basketball. Even though none of us ever played the sport, she taught us 5 rules that we can apply to how we live our life. And I'll recap them just before I hop off. She taught us, play your position. That was one of the main things. Play your position. The next thing was protect your pivot. Keep moving. Just pivot. That's it. Just keep in motion, but you can pivot. Don't waste the time out. Don't waste all your time. And then when you need that time, you don't have it. You only get so many days. Same way, they only give so many timeouts in a basketball game. Team over trophy community. She had an open door, open heart. Anybody needed anything, she was going to come. She was going to open the door. I mean, we laughed. We tried to figure out who all has stayed with us over the years. And they're different people for different times. You went off to school, you kind of lost your space in the house. But you can come back. That's just a joke. Nobody lost their space at all. Anybody can come back. And then, of course, you know, what's your legacy? What's the legacy you're leaving behind? Your dash. What are you doing with that dash? And so her pivot solidified my pivot, that autism is not my focus. My focus is my resiliency my mom taught me, and how I may wobble sometime, but I'm not going to break. And that's what I want to make sure other professional women like me understand. I don't want you crumbling when you get home because you're burdened. Because you're not broken, you're just burdened. There's a big difference. And to know that when you put things in place, you're able to find that rhythm that you have created, and it pulls you to get you through those plot twists, those tough times. And that's what we've been able to do right now. So that's why I can smile and I can sit here on my mom's first heavenly birthday. If anyone doesn't realize, I mean, we buried my mom Saturday. And today is her birthday. My sisters went to her favorite senior village and dropped off cupcakes. And I chose to do my lane. See, when I say know your position, this is my position. This is me. This is what I do. They did what they're going to do. That's so important. So have a great one, everyone, and make the best of your dash. Yes, Miss Jackie's Girls Forever. Most definitely. This legacy will continue. So have a great one, everyone. Hey, Auntie Karen. Bye, everyone.